Welcome back. We are on day 29 of this war, and today everything this channel has been warning about since day one happened simultaneously in a single 12-hour window. The Houthis entered the war. A third front opened. The Red Sea is now at risk. 3,500 American sailors and Marines arrived in the Middle East. Iran struck Prince Sultan Air Base, wounding more than 24 American troops in a single week. Israel hit Iran's nuclear facilities again. A major aluminum smelter in Abu Dhabi sustained significant damage. A fire broke out at Kuwait International Airport after a drone hit fuel tanks. A port in Oman was targeted. 9 paramedics were killed in southern Lebanon in 5 separate Israeli strikes in a single day. A journalist was killed in Lebanon. Cluster munitions struck Israel. And Trump told reporters the war is close to ending. Let's start with the Houthis, because their entry into this conflict is the single most strategically significant development of day 29, and it needs to be understood with precision. Houthi rebels based in Yemen said they launched ballistic missiles against Israel on Saturday for the first time in the conflict, claiming 2 separate attacks hours apart. Houthi Brigadier General Yahya Sari said on their satellite network that the Houthis launched a barrage of ballistic missiles towards sensitive Israeli military sites in southern Israel, and added that attacks would continue until the aggression against all fronts of the resistance ceases, referring to Iran and its ally Hezbollah. NBC News Israel intercepted the missiles. No confirmed casualties in Israel from the Houthi strikes on day 29, but intercept is not irrelevant. Every interceptor fired costs between $4 million and $12 million. Every Houthi ballistic missile costs a fraction of that. The economics of interception at scale are exactly the same asymmetric cost exchange that Iran has been exploiting for 29 days. Now, let's fact-check what the Houthi entry actually means strategically, because there are 2 completely different versions of this story circulating, and they cannot both be right. Thomas Juneau, a professor at the University of Ottawa and associate fellow with Chatham House, told Time that if Houthi strikes remain limited to a small number of direct attacks on Israel, they will not have a major impact on the evolution of the war, noting Israeli anti-missile defenses are able to intercept most Houthi missiles, and those that succeed have caused limited damage. Al Jazeera. That is the conservative assessment. Limited strikes on Israel, low strategic impact. But then Juneau added the qualifier that changes everything. The professor said the Houthis would cause a much more important impact on the war if they were to start targeting maritime shipping in the Red Sea and try to close the Bab al-Mandab Strait. Al Jazeera, the Bab al-Mandab, the strait at the southern end of the Red Sea through which ships must pass to reach the Suez Canal. If the Houthis close the Bab al-Mandab while Iran holds the Strait of Hormuz, then both entry points to the world's most critical maritime trade corridor are simultaneously blocked. Every ship that cannot go through Hormuz is already rerouting around the Cape of Good Hope, adding 12 to 14 days to every voyage. If the Bab al-Mandab also closes, the Cape of Good Hope route is the only option left for any ship moving between Europe, Asia, and the Gulf. The shipping insurance market, the container industry, and the global supply chain would face a disruption of genuinely unprecedented scale. Analysts told CNBC that the Houthis could attempt to choke off maritime traffic through the Bab al-Mandab Strait, separating the Arabian Peninsula and the Horn of Africa, through which ships must pass to reach the Red Sea and the Suez Canal, adding to pressure on global trade. CNN could attempt, not have attempted yet, but the Houthis have done exactly this before. The Houthis played an outsized role in upending global shipping between November 2023 and January 2025, when they attacked over 100 merchant vessels in the Red Sea in a campaign of solidarity with Palestinians. Those strikes failed to deter the Houthis and only stopped when a ceasefire was brokered between Israel and Hamas in January 2025. Al Jazeera. 100 merchant vessels attacked in the Red Sea over 14 months. $1 trillion worth of goods normally passes through the Red Sea annually. The Houthis have already demonstrated both the capability and the willingness to sustain a prolonged maritime disruption campaign. Their entry into this war is not a symbolic gesture, it is the activation of a proven playbook. Maersk, widely regarded as a barometer of global trade, had said earlier in March that the situation in the Middle East had prompted it to pause future trans-Suez sailings through the Bab al-Mandab. CNN Maersk, the world's second-largest container shipping company, had already paused Red Sea transits before the Houthis fired a single missile in this conflict. Now the Houthis have fired. The question of whether Maersk's pause becomes a permanent rerouting is the most consequential supply chain question of the next 72 hours. Now, let's talk about what happened at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia this week, because the accumulation of American casualties at that single facility is reaching a level that the American public has not been presented with clearly. More than 24 U.S. troops have been wounded in Iranian attacks on Saudi Arabia's Prince Sultan Air Base in the past week, according to 2 people briefed on the matter. Iran fired 6 ballistic missiles and 29 drones at the base Friday, injuring at least 15 troops, including 5 seriously. NBC News. The base came under attack twice earlier in the same week, wounding 14 more American troops. That means at least 29 Americans wounded at a single Saudi air base in approximately 72 hours. Not across the region, not spread across multiple countries. At one base in Saudi Arabia, an E-3 Sentry aircraft was also damaged by the strike. Bloomberg, an E-3 Sentry, the airborne early warning and control system aircraft that provides radar surveillance and command and control for the entire American air operation. That is not a fighter jet. That is the command brain of the American air campaign over Iran, damaged in the same strike that wounded 29 troops. Let's look at the infrastructure picture on day 29, because the scale of physical destruction happening across the region in a single day is extraordinary. A major global aluminum company, which is the second largest supplier of the product, said its smelter site suffered significant damage from Iranian missile and drone attacks on Abu Dhabi, and a huge fire broke out at Kuwait International Airport after a drone attack hit fuel tanks there. A port in Oman was also targeted by a drone attack. Abu Dhabi's aluminum smelter, the second largest aluminum supplier in the world, significantly damaged. Kuwait International Airport's fuel tanks on fire from a drone strike. The port of Salalah in Oman targeted, all on the same day. Aluminum feeds into the aerospace, automotive, construction, and packaging industries globally. A significant damage event at the world's second largest aluminum supplier is not an abstract economic statistic. It is a supply shock that will work its way through global manufacturing over the coming weeks and months. Iran agreed to allow humanitarian aid and agricultural shipments through the Strait of Hormuz, following a request from the United Nations. Ali Bahraini, the country's ambassador to the UN in Geneva, said Iran agreed to facilitate and expedite such movement. Iran opened a humanitarian lane in the strait. That is a genuine diplomatic development, and it deserves to be reported clearly. The UN Task Force for Fertilizer and Food Shipments that was announced yesterday is now operational with Iranian consent. The vital waterway usually handles 1/5 of the world's oil shipments and nearly 1/3 of the world's fertilizer trade. NBC News. 1/3 of the world's fertilizer trade passes through Hormuz. Iran agreeing to let humanitarian shipments through does not reopen the commercial energy lanes, but it signals that Iran is calibrating its closure, keeping maximum economic pressure on energy markets while creating enough humanitarian goodwill to prevent a complete international consensus forming against it. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif held a 1-hour call with Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian on Saturday, with Pezeshkian stressing the need to build trust in order to facilitate talks and mediation, while Sharif detailed the diplomatic outreach his government is undertaking. CBS News Build Trust. That is the language of a country that is not yet ready to negotiate, but is willing to talk about talking. The distinction between building trust and actually negotiating is the distance between a phone call and a peace deal. Pakistan is on the phone. The table in Islamabad is still being built. And the Houthis just fired their first missiles. 9 paramedics were killed and 7 wounded in 5 separate Israeli attacks in southern Lebanon on Saturday, bringing the number of health workers killed in March to at least 51. WHO said the attacks are severely disrupting access to care across southern Lebanon. 51 health workers killed in Lebanon in March alone. The WHO is not a partisan organization. When it says access to care is severely disrupted across southern Lebanon, it is describing a public health collapse in real time. People who are wounded in southern Lebanon today may not be able to access functioning medical facilities. That is not a consequence of this war. That is a consequence happening right now. Iran showed no signs of ceding its control over the Strait of Hormuz. The same day, Iran blocked 2 Chinese ships from entering the strait and sought to formalize fees for ships passing through it. Bloomberg Iran blocked Chinese ships. China is Iran's largest oil customer and one of the countries whose goodwill Iran most needs to maintain. Blocking Chinese ships even temporarily is a signal that Iran is enforcing its Hormuz policy without exceptions, including for friendly states. That is either a negotiating signal to China that even Beijing's friendship has limits, or it is a sign that Iran's Hormuz management has become less calibrated as the war continues. Either way, it deserves scrutiny. Here is where the facts leave us at the end of day 29, the last day of the first month of this war. The Houthis have entered the conflict firing 2 separate ballistic missile barrages at Israel on the same day. The Red Sea and the Bab al-Mandab are now at risk of joining Hormuz as closed maritime corridors. More than 24 Americans wounded at a single Saudi base in 72 hours. An E-3 Sentry Command aircraft damaged. Abu Dhabi's aluminum smelter significantly hit. Kuwait Airport fuel tanks on fire. The port of Salalah targeted. Iran agreed to a humanitarian lane in Hormuz, but blocked Chinese ships from commercial transit on the same day. Pakistan's PM spoke to Iran's president for 1 hour about building trust. 51 health workers killed in Lebanon in March. 9 paramedics killed in a single day in 5 separate strikes. Israel struck Iranian nuclear sites again. 3,500 American sailors and Marines arrived in the region, and Trump said the war is close to ending. 1 month. That is where we are. 1 month of the most expensive, most geographically expansive, most economically destructive conflict since World War II. And today, on the last day of month 1, a new combatant entered. The Houthis are in. The clock to April 6th is running. We will keep verifying every claim. We will keep counting every cost. Stay with us.